Ladies and gentlemen, there are certain laws in this universe that are not written in books or carved on stone tablets, yet they govern the invisible framework of our lives, just as surely as gravity pulls an apple to the ground. One of those laws, so subtle and yet so powerful that it shapes destinies and directs economies, is what I call the law of calling money by its name. Now, when people hear that phrase, many immediately think it's about greed or some kind of mystical self-help chant about attracting wealth. But that's not what I'm talking about at all. I'm speaking of a law that is deeply woven into the very fabric of human consciousness. A law that science, psychology, and spiritual truth all quietly affirm. It's the principle that whatever you consistently call by name with conviction, you organize your entire neurobiological system to recognize, attract, and sustain. Let me explain. In neuroscience, we've discovered something fascinating called the reticular activating system, a cluster of neurons in the brainstem that acts like a gatekeeper for your attention. It decides what you notice, what you filter out, and what you label as important. If you buy a red car, suddenly you see red cars everywhere. They were always there, but now your brain calls them forward. You named them as significant, and the brain obeyed. In the same way, when you call money by its name, not from greed, not from fear, but from understanding, you tell your brain, your emotions, your habits, your posture toward life, that this is part of your domain. You see, most people don't call money by its name. They call it by its absence. They say things like, I can't afford that. Money doesn't grow on trees. People like me never get ahead. And the brain, that faithful servant, takes the command literally. It filters out opportunities that contradict those words. It says, I see, we are not the kind of person who notices abundance. We are the kind who sees lack. So it edits reality to match the script you've been speaking. The law of calling money by its name isn't about manipulating the universe. It's about aligning your internal language with the principles that govern energy, effort, and perception. Every word we speak carries an electromagnetic signature in the body. The tone of your speech changes your vagus nerve response, your heart rhythm, even your immune system activity. When you speak words of fear, your brain releases cortisol. When you speak words of certainty, of expectation, your prefrontal cortex lights up, your dopamine system activates, and suddenly what felt impossible feels within reach. You haven't just spoken into the air. You've spoken into your nervous system. I remember working with a young entrepreneur who came to me utterly defeated. His business was failing, his employees were leaving, and he said to me, I've tried everything. I've prayed, I've worked, I've borrowed, but nothing changes. I listened to him speak for about 10 minutes, and then I stopped him. I said, do you realize you haven't once spoken about success in the present tense? Everything you've said places abundance in the past or in someone else's story. You've never called it into your own. He looked at me puzzled. So I told him, from now on, every morning, I want you to stand in front of the mirror and declare out loud what belongs to you. Not what you wish you had, but what you recognize as yours in potential. 3 months later, he called me back. His business had not just stabilized, it had doubled. He said, I didn't get new clients at first. What changed was me. I started seeing opportunities I had ignored. I started saying yes to things I used to dismiss. It's as if the world rearranged itself around my new vocabulary. I told him, no, son, the world didn't rearrange itself. You did. You called money by its name, and your mind answered. Oh, there's a profound connection between what we name and what we nurture. Think of how a parent names a child. That name becomes a declaration of identity. When you call that child brave, you begin to see bravery emerge. When you call them lazy, they begin to act like it. Words are not mere labels, they are invitations to being. And so it is with money, or health, or love. Whatever you consistently call by name with belief becomes magnetized within your awareness. You see, in the human brain, repetition is the language of truth. The more you repeat something, whether positive or negative, the more your neurons wire together around that statement. This is called Hagin learning. Neurons that fire together wire together. If every day you say, "I never have enough," your neurons begin to treat scarcity as a fact, not a feeling. If you say, "Money comes to me freely and purposefully," your brain begins to behave as though that's the baseline reality. You start to act, decide and risk accordingly, and the world responds. There's a reason why some people seem to attract wealth effortlessly while others fight for every dime. It's not magic, it's neurological momentum. One group has trained their nervous system to expect provision. The other has trained theirs to expect struggle. Expectation is a command to the subconscious mind. Whatever you expect, your mind rehearses. Whatever it rehearses, it replicates. I once gave a talk at a medical symposium on the neurobiology of belief. One of the attendees, a skeptical biochemist, stood up and said, "Are you saying that by speaking about money, we can somehow change our biology?" And I smiled and said, "Yes, because belief is biology." When you declare something with emotional conviction, you release neurotransmitters that alter gene expression. You create the conditions for action, persistence, and creativity, the very ingredients of wealth. He didn't look convinced then, but a year later, he wrote me an email saying he had started practicing verbal affirmations every morning. Not vague ones, but specific ones tied to financial clarity and generosity. His words were, "I call money into its rightful place in my life as a servant, not a master." Within months, he negotiated a raise he had avoided asking for in 10 years. Now, that's the thing. Calling money by its name is not about worshiping money. It's about restoring order to a relationship that most people have turned upside down. Money was never meant to dominate the human spirit. It was designed to serve it. But if you refuse to call it by name, you give it permission to wander, to hide, to remain unaccounted for in your consciousness. Anything you will not name, you cannot master. The ancients understood this. They called things into being by naming them. Modern psychology calls it cognitive framing. Neuroscience calls it attentional priming. The spiritual mind calls it faith. Whatever the language, the principle is the same. Naming activates awareness, and awareness creates reality. I'll tell you something from my own early years. There was a time I knew lack intimately, not as a concept, but as a companion. I remember standing in a small apartment, the kind where the wallpaper peels off the walls and the refrigerator hums louder than the silence in your chest. I looked at a stack of unpaid bills and felt the weight of shame pressing against my ribs. My instinct was to say, "I'm broke. I can't." But something inside me refused. Instead, I said, "I may not have it in hand, but I have it in reach." That simple shift, calling it in reach instead of impossible, changed my posture. My voice grew stronger. My thinking grew sharper. I started to notice ideas and opportunities that had been right in front of me all along. It wasn't that money suddenly appeared. It was that I did. You see, the way you speak determines the way you stand. The way you stand determines the way you see. And the way you see determines the way you live. The law of calling money by its name begins not in your wallet, but in your words. Science tells us that every emotion you feel is accompanied by a biochemical cascade that changes your body. Fear constricts your blood vessels, gratitude expands them. Doubt lowers your serotonin, Confidence raises it. That means your speech isn't just spiritual, it's physiological. When you say, "I can," your body produces energy to match that statement. When you say, "I can't," your body prepares for defeat. You become chemically aligned with your confession. Let me make this plain. When you speak lack, you shrink your own field of awareness. When you speak abundance, you expand it. This isn't wishful thinking. This is measurable through brain imaging. Researchers at Stanford found that when subjects practiced daily verbal affirmations linked to personal goals, their brain's reward circuitry lit up as if they had already achieved those goals. The subconscious mind can't distinguish between what's vividly declared and what's vividly lived. That's why your words matter more than you realize. So when I tell you to call money by its name, I mean, stop whispering about it as if it's a shameful thing. Stop avoiding the conversation because you think spirituality and wealth can't coexist. You are not being holy by being afraid of abundance. You are being whole when you learn to command it into its rightful purpose, to flow through you, not just to you. And let's be honest, some people can't call money by its name because deep down they're angry at it. They've been hurt by the pursuit of it, or they've watched others misuse it. So they associate money with pain. The moment they think of it, their nervous system contracts. That's trauma, not truth. Money itself is neutral. It takes on the meaning you assign it. If you call it trouble, it will behave like trouble. If you call it a tool, it will serve as a tool. You see, money is one of the most obedient servants you'll ever have, but one of the worst masters you'll ever serve. The only way to keep it in its rightful place is to name it properly. Some of you sitting here tonight have been saying, "I just need enough to get by." That's not humility. That's programming. Because the brain interprets that as a limit. You're telling your neurons, "Only send me what barely sustains me." And they comply. But if you dare to say, "I call abundance into my life, not for greed, but for generosity," suddenly your internal chemistry shifts. Your brain starts scanning the environment for ways to make that real. The law responds to clarity. I often tell people God, the universe, or whatever name you choose for the source of life, does not respond to confusion. It responds to conviction. And conviction is formed in the crucible of speech. The words you repeat become the beliefs you embody. And the beliefs you embody shape the outcomes you attract. There's an old proverb that says, "The power of life and death is in the tongue." Modern neuroscience would phrase it differently. The brain wires itself to mirror your most frequent declarations. Either way, the truth stands. Your words create your world. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, so you're saying I should just talk about money and it'll come. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying your speech is the first act of alignment. It primes your perception, it energizes your physiology, it focuses your attention, and those four together create the conditions for prosperity to take root. Money doesn't respond to idle speech. It responds to aligned speech, speech backed by purpose, faith, and action. When you say, "Money comes to me easily and consistently," you're not commanding the universe like a magician. You're commanding your mind like a leader. You're instructing your awareness to see opportunities, to make better decisions, to act in ways that harmonize with increase. Let me show you how this plays out practically. A woman once came to me after a conference. She said, "I've been saying affirmations for years, but nothing changes." I asked her, "What are you saying?" She said, "I keep saying, 'I want more money.'" I said, "That's the problem. You're reinforcing wanting. You've never called money by its name. You've only called the feeling of not having it." She blinked and said, "What should I say instead?" I told her, "Say, I am a faithful steward of increasing resources. Money flows through me for good." That's a name. That's identity. 6 months later, she wrote to me that she had received a promotion and started a small foundation for single mothers. She said, "For the first time, I don't feel guilty about prospering." You see, when you call money by its right name, it stops being your idol and becomes your instrument. Everything in your life responds to how you name it. If you name your work hard, it will resist you. If you name it meaningful, it will feed you. If you name your waiting season delay, you'll grow bitter. If you name it development, you'll grow stronger.